Welcome to the session on making home visits. Now, a lot of the information that we're going to be going over in these sessions is coming directly out of the Overflow Training Manual, and this is a great resource to use actually for visitation. Let's just jump right into it. The first thing I want to say is there's a lot of people who will tell you that visitation does not work in our culture today. Now, it is true that people are less likely to invite you into their home. It is true that some people are less likely to open the door, but it's not true just to write off visitation as something of the past. Now, if you're doing visitation the way you did it 20, 30, 40 years ago, then the chances are it's not going to be as effective as it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. But there is a way to be effective in making home visits in today's culture, today's society. And our purpose, our goal in what we're teaching here is to help you be the most effective possible. So we're going to begin with the understanding that there are a lot of kinds of visits that you can make. There are evangelistic visits. These are visits made to people that you're not sure whether or not they've given their life to Jesus. The purpose of these visits is to share the gospel and to find out where people stand in their relationship with God. For example, if someone has recently been a guest at your church, but you don't know about their salvation experience, now we always tell people, never assume that anybody is saved. I've met people who've been in church for 20 or 30 years, and then one day they get saved. For all those years, they've known they haven't been saved, but they've never given their life to Christ. Now, there were a bunch of people in the church that assumed that they were saved because they were at the church. So if you've never heard somebody's salvation story, don't just assume that they're saved. You need to find out for yourself. And so if someone comes to visit, even if they're coming to you from another church, salvation is the best place to begin. In fact, salvation would be the purpose of any visit that you have where you don't know that person's salvation story. And so you've got evangelistic visits, you've got follow-up visits. Now, follow-up visits are visits to people who have recently made a decision to follow Jesus. And there are several purposes in this. One is to help them connect to your church. This is the reason that a team should visit with people who are similar in age or who have common interests, because you want to build bridges, you want to connect to them. Another reason for a follow-up visit is to help this person understand what baptism is about and the importance of following Christ. And so let's say somebody makes a salvation decision at camp, and you have a follow-up team go, and this follow-up team, maybe the people, the adults on this follow-up team have children the same age as this child who is saved. Or maybe it's a follow-up team that's made of children that same age. And they go, but their purpose is actually to share with this person the importance of being baptized, what baptism means, the difference between salvation and baptism, and the importance of what it means to follow Christ. Now, another reason for a follow-up visit is to see how somebody's been doing since they accepted Christ. For example, have they told anyone about their decision? What was the response of that person? Do they have any questions? Do they own a Bible that's easy to understand? Now, another reason for a follow-up visit is and this has to do with children who've given their life to Jesus, is to go visit to make sure the children have actually told the parents the decision they made. Now, this is a great opportunity to engage unsaved parents in a conversation about what it means to be saved, because you're standing on their doorstep. You're there for the purpose of saying, hey, your child made the greatest decision of all, and they talked to one of our leaders, and they prayed, and they asked Jesus to be their Lord and Savior. And they did that because, they expressed they weren't sure they were going to heaven. And now, does all that make sense to you? It's a great opportunity to find out from the mom and dad where they stand in their relationship with God. And while I'm on that point, when you're in a visit, don't be afraid to ask. If somebody says, oh yeah, and they mention going to church or that's great, they're saved, it's okay to ask, well, hey, tell me about when you gave your life to Jesus. Always look for the opportunity to hear someone else's salvation story, because there are many people who will call themselves Christians, many people who will say they're going to heaven, but when you hear their salvation story, you suddenly realize they're trusting the wrong thing to save them, that they're trusting good works, or they're trusting the fact that they go to church, these things that cannot save you, but that's where their trust is. It's not in the fact that they've given their life to Jesus, they've received Jesus Christ as their personal Lord and Savior. Now let's talk about some other kinds of visits too. There are evangelistic visits. Now that's a visit to anybody that you don't know their salvation story. There are follow-up visits. Then there are ministry visits. Now, the purpose of a ministry visit is to reach out to somebody who's in need. For example, you might visit someone who's lost a loved one, or say they have a family member who's been sick in the hospital, and so you drop by and you want to see how they're doing, or maybe to pray for them because they've been sick, or maybe they have someone in your church is moving and you're dropping by, just to see if they need anything, to see how they're doing. Ministry visits are many times made at a time of change in a person's life. People are more receptive to sometimes it seems like they have a greater openness to a relationship with God when there's actually change going on in their life. But a lot of times these ministry visits, these are saved people. These are people that are part of your church family. They attend church. They love Jesus. But you're going by for the purpose of encouraging them, blessing them, praying for them, helping them. When I was young, I was very evangelistic. I loved doing visitation. And one day we were out on a visit, and one of the girls in the car with our team made the statement, how come we never visit people that are members at our church, but they don't come? And immediately I snapped back and I said, well, they're already saved. They know where they belong. I'm not going to waste my time visiting somebody who knows where they ought to be. They're just not there. Now, let me tell you, that is a very wrong attitude. Basically what I was saying is, I'm only going to visit lost people. I'm not going to waste my time visiting someone who's saved. And that is so wrong. That actually misses really the heart and the character of God. Because if we spend all our time making evangelistic visits, but we miss the opportunities to minister to each other in times of need, in times of crisis, we are doing more than just missing opportunities. We're not showing fully the love and care of Christ. I have a passion for lost souls. I want lost people to be saved. My heart grieves over people who don't know Jesus. But that's not an excuse not to meet the need of a brother or sister in Christ when they're going through a difficult time. And so I simply say that to say ministry visits sometimes are overlooked. And we've all heard of the person who left the church because they went through a time of need and nobody helped them. Now, I'm not saying that's the church's fault completely, because I've also known times, I remember a lady who got mad at the church I was on staff at. And she was mad because nobody came to visit her when she was in the hospital. And the only problem was none of us knew she was in the hospital. She never let us know. So sometimes you can't meet a need because you don't know about it. But when you know there's a need and you know that there's good that can be done, then go do that good and be a blessing to someone. Another kind of visit is a church strengthening visit. Now, the purpose of this kind of contact is to strengthen and encourage people who are already actively attending your church. For example, say that somebody is attending your church, they're active all the time, they're a Sunday school teacher, they're not going through a time of crisis, there's not some great ministry need, but you simply make an appointment, which is always good to do. Make an appointment. Hey, can I come by Thursday night? Really just want to talk to you, see what God's doing in your life. Just want to see if there's things I can pray for. And so it's an opportunity really just to strengthen the people in your church. It's not a crisis, not a need, but you're just simply coming by to deepen. And sometimes there are issues that you need to talk about that will strengthen your ministry because you dealt with these issues instead of sweeping them under the rug. But not every church strengthening visit's negative. It's not negative. It's positive. Sometimes it's simply because you haven't touched base with that person in a while and you want to follow up. You simply want to reconnect with them a little bit. And then the last kind of visit is, and this is not a home visit, this is a hospital visit, which is a different category. But since we're talking about visits, we're going to go ahead and touch base on it too. Although your purpose for making visits may differ, most home visits have a lot of things that are in common. And our purpose in these sessions is really to walk you through the basics of making an effective home visit. And the key in each kind of visit really is for you to, the bottom line is you've got to genuinely care about the person whom you're visiting. In other words, you're talking to this person and your mind isn't racing 5 minutes ahead to be somewhere else, or yes, I'm here, but this is just a job to be done. You need to have genuine care, and whether it's an evangelistic visit or somebody who's been missing church lately or somebody that has a need, they need to see in you a sincere compassion and love. And also always remember your purpose. Whatever reason you have for being there, Make the most of every opportunity to reach, to teach, to share, and to meet the needs of those people in any way possible. So now let's jump right into preparing to make a home visit. So what do you have to do to prepare? Well, first, how do you dress? Well, you want to dress nicely, but casually. You don't want to show up in a suit and a tie, and because that's a little bit awkward. In fact, that's almost like a salesman. You also want to dress for the weather. Now, I didn't always follow this. Used to, I would wear short sleeves, and I would wear no jacket on the coldest visitation days possible. And my hope was that somebody would have pity on me. We would open the door, and it would be freezing cold, and they'd see me, short sleeve shirt, no jacket, and they would say, "Oh, come on in, come on in." And I have to admit, sometimes people did do that. And in fact, let me go as far to say in the 80s and even the early 90s that happened. But really, these days, our culture's changed a little bit, and I really don't see much of a benefit of dressing. Plus, I kind of got convicted. It was a little bit manipulative, I felt. And so, but dress for the weather, however you're comfortable. You're going to be standing on the door most of the time. Most houses, you will not get into the door, but you don't have to dress to kind of gimmick your way in either. Okay, so that's how to dress. Now let's move on to who to visit. Well, you're surrounded by people to visit. Just drive through your community, and they're the people that you need to visit. You could almost say any house where you don't know that person has a relationship with Christ. But some people will get a higher priority simply because they visited your church, they made a salvation decision, and sometimes it's the people you're in contact with, people you have relationships with, people that play on your son or daughter's ball team, people that you already know inside the community. And so there are lots of different people that you can visit. Sometimes you'll connect with these people in church. Sometimes you'll connect with them in the community. Sometimes it'll be through things you do, similar interests. And some of the best visits have to do with somebody that you have things in common with. And so if you share, say you have the same coach of the baseball team, and so you drop by their house, and honestly, sometimes it might even be a little awkward to drop by their house. You might want to say, "Hey, can I come by?" Or even better, "Hey, we're having a cookout at our house. Why don't you come on over to our house?" And so just because you want to make a visit doesn't always mean that it needs to be you going to their house either. Where to visit? Well, you'll save a lot of time by mapping out your visits before you leave. Even if you're assigned visits, take a few minutes in the car, organize them. I usually figure out the best, quickest route to the visits, the best roundabout trip to make before I come back. And then inside that, you can also consider making some door-to-door visits to the houses alongside it. Many times I'll go to a house, I'll make a visit, and then I'll go door to door. If it's the end of the street, I'll hit a few houses down there because I love making door-to-door visits. You never know who's going to answer the door. You never know who's on the other side. And what you'll find is if you do that, you'll make 3 or 4 times as many visits in really just about the same amount of time. What to take for visitation? Don't carry a big Bible with you. So you don't want to be like the Bible salesman at the door, where they open the door and here you're standing there with the big Bible, the big print family Bible. Sure, take a Bible. I usually take a small little New Testament that fits in my pocket. So it's not obvious, but I have it there if I need it. So take a Bible, take tracts with you. I carry tracts with me. Gospel tract, it is a simple way that if somebody's not going to listen to you, you can say, "Hey, I'd like to leave this with you." On the back, we put our church information. A lot of times I'll put my name, my phone number, in case they want to talk some more. And then the tract simply explains about how to give your life to Jesus. Now, there's all sorts of different tracts out there. Billy Graham Association has tracts. They have one called Steps to Peace with God. There are tracts that are cartoon tracts that are really good, targeting young adults and youth and college age and even children. And so you want to take tracts. Church information is another good thing. But now what you don't want to do is to be at the door and say, "Oh, yes, invite you to our church, and here's our church information, and tell you about Jesus, and here's our information about how to give your life to Jesus, and here's information about an upcoming event." You don't want to be standing at their door handing them all these things. Really, there needs to be one point where you reach out and you hand them one thing. So if that means you print your own tract, your own plan of salvation with your church information, that's great. But it's the one thing that you feel like is the most important thing to get through their door. Now, when you get in the car, take a moment. You've mapped out your visits now. Take a few moments to pray. Pray what will happen on your visit. Ask God to be in control. Commit your words and your ways to Him. Follow His lordship. Ask Him to move in your hearts, to give you direction, and ask God to do what only God can do, what you could never put together, what only God can do. Then, and this is going to sound very fleshly, but it's really not, take a mint. Put a Tic Tac in your mouth. Now, it sounds silly, but if you've ever talked up close with somebody that had bad breath, you'll know why it's important that you don't have bad breath. Just imagine you're standing at the door. In fact, I had an experience a number of years ago. I was standing at the door. I was visiting with my Sunday school teacher, and I wasn't on church staff. This individual was talking to somebody, sharing Jesus, and I was pretty close in the conversation too, and I could smell his breath. And I didn't want to smell his breath, and I knew the person who was listening, they were really listening, but that had to be an obstacle for them to overcome unless God just supernaturally did not let them smell it. So, pop a mint in your mouth. Now, you also want to be careful. There's some very big mints out there, and I made a mistake once. I put a mint in my mouth. I'm walking up to the door. Actually, I put it in my mouth while I was in the car. We got there. I'm walking up to the door. I realize it's still in my mouth. It's a big, peppermint. So this is going to be a hard thing. I'm going to have trouble talking and having this in my mouth at the same time. So I rang the doorbell even before I realized it was there. Then I realized I need to get rid of this. So I began to chew it up very frantically. So I'm chewing up the peppermint. And I don't know if you've ever chewed up a peppermint really fast. It can have a dizzying effect on you. So I chewed up the peppermint really fast. Suddenly, my sinuses are inflamed. My eyes are watering. And the person opened the door, and I am literally coughing and sputtering with tears in my eyes on the porch. And even before I was able to say, hi, and introduce myself, they were asking if I was okay. Because, for all they knew, I was a choking, dying man having a heart attack on their front porch. Not exactly the first impression you want to make. And so take a mint. I like using the little Tic Tacs because they're small, but they are effective. Don't chew gum, because the tendency is you forget it's in your mouth, you're chewing on the gum, and it becomes a distraction while you're talking. And so a few things to do in the car on your way there. Now, also in the car, figure out who's going to talk. Okay, who's going to do the talking here? Who's going to introduce you? And the best way, choose one talker. And so you get up to the door. Now everybody knows who's going to take the lead. And so they open the door, and that person is ready to talk. Now, it won't always stay with that person. Sometimes there'll be a connection. God will just point to one of you, and you'll know, it's time for me to take over. Or God will point to the talker, and he'll know it's time for me to step back and pray and let somebody else take control of this conversation. So while you're in the conversation, just because you've been pointed to as the talker doesn't mean that you're going to keep being the talker. What it means is you're simply going to get the conversation going. And so you're going to greet the person at the door. You're going to introduce your team. You're going to let them know what church you're from. And actually, I do it in a little bit different order. When I go to the door, the first thing I say is, hi, we're from, and I say my church name. And then I introduce myself and the team that I'm with. Now, if I notice the person, I'm not going to have a lot of time with this person. Their body language is telling me this is going to be a fast conversation. I'll say we're from the church, and then I may just go right into, hey, is there anything we can pray for you? Or the reason that we're at the standing there on their doorstep. So realize that just because you're the talker, God may have a different plan. Follow the leadership of the Holy Spirit. Be ready, but also be flexible. Now, learn the information before you get to the house also. Who are you visiting? What is the spouse's name? What are the names of their kids? What grades are they in? Did any of them have a birthday recently? Because it's always great, to be able to bring that up. Hey, I noticed that yesterday was your birthday. Did you have a happy birthday? Oh, that's great. See, there's an introduction into a conversation there that's very relational. You never know who you're going to meet, so be ready to meet and to talk to all of them, everybody in the whole family. And then never overlook the children. Now, I've been on some visits with some adults, and it's very obvious they're so focused on the adults, they very easily overlook the kids. But sometimes this visit, God has prepared for those kids, So make sure you know their names. Make sure you're ready. Okay, what else do you know about the family? Is there anything going on that you're aware of? Any crisis, any situations? Is there anything you know that'll help your team connect more closely with them? So learn the information before you get there, before you find yourself on the doorstep. And then when you get there, don't take the information with you. I mean, it looks kind of strange. You knock on the door and you're holding this card in your hand. Now, I did this once, and I was young. And what you'll find is Now, I've been through a lot of evangelistic and visitation training, but for the most part, what I've learned came from my own mistakes. And I'll share a lot of those mistakes with you in these sessions. And one day I got out of the car, I'm carrying this big old, it's a full page of information, it has birthdays and everything we know about this family. I'm walking up to the door. I don't even realize it's in my hand. And so I start talking to the family and so forth, so on. And at the end of the conversation, they looked at me and they said, "Hey, what is that? Can I see that? Because I see my name on it." And then suddenly, and I handed it to them. I wasn't going to say, "No, you can't see it." And they said, "Now, where did you get all this information? How did you get the information what school our child attends?" And it became a very awkward conversation because people are very sensitive to their privacy. The next question was, who else is going to see this? Who has access to this? It's on paper. When you throw these away, do they go in the trash? Do you shred them? Are you careful with my information? And so it became a very awkward situation, not exactly what we wanted on a visit. And so it's the last thing that you want there as well. So who are you going to talk to? What do you know about the family? Learn the information. Okay, now we've gone over some things that need to happen really in the car. So now you're getting to the house, you're on your way there, and you're going to park. And so where do you park? If possible, park in the street. Don't park in the driveway, because undoubtedly you're going to park in the driveway. You're going to be in the middle of the plan of salvation. The brother will come home. He'll need to park in the garage. You're going to end up moving your car. That, or you're going to park in the driveway, and your car is going to start leaking oil, and you're going to leave a nasty, dirty spot on their driveway. Lots of reasons not to park in the driveway. Park in the street, if possible. Walk to the house. And if your visit is during the daytime, also avoid parking in front of the mailbox. Now, as you're approaching the house, approach it quietly. Don't make a lot of noise. The first sign that you're there should be the doorbell. Be careful not to comment about things about the house. You don't want team members commenting on, the look of the house or how old this is. And I've been in some embarrassing situations where I had team members who said things that they shouldn't have said. I was with some youth who had never been visiting before. And we were on the doorstep of a house, and they found it very funny that a frog had pooped on the doorstep. Just a big old glob right there in front of the door. And so we walk up, and probably the first thing these people heard were these two students laughing and talking about the big frog poop on their porch. Not what you want. I was in another house with a team that I was training, and yes, I did have to have a conversation with them afterwards. One of the students I was with, and it was, I believe, a 6th grader, were walking up to the house and said quite loudly, "Wow, these people must be very poor. Look at their house." Not the first impression you want to make. So you want to approach quietly. You want to make a good first impression. And a good first impression is not when a team tramples up loudly, making a ruckus. It's also not when a team tramples down somebody's lawn that is very precious to them. Now, my lawn, please, you and your dog can come walk across my lawn. I welcome it. I am totally fine with that. My lawn is not precious to me. My lawn is grass that I have to cut. But other people, boy, they spend time on their lawn. They manicure it. They put detail into it. It's very important to them. And you can tell those lawns. But a good rule of thumb is don't walk across the grass. Walk on the sidewalk, walk on the driveway, even though it'll take you out and about a little bit. But don't walk across the lawn unless you ultimately just have to do it. I made the mistake of walking across the lawn. Here's where I learned my lesson. I was walking up. It was a long ways around. It was a nice-looking lawn. I knew better, but I walked across the lawn. I did not see the little sign that said, "Please don't walk on the grass." I did not see it. Nor did I make it to the porch, because before I even made it to the porch, the owner of that house opened the door and yelled at me to get off the lawn. "Can't you read? I've got a sign. Don't walk on the grass." And very embarrassed, I quickly made my way off the lawn as quickly as I could. Now, at that point, quite frankly, I should have just said, "Hey, I'm so sorry, very sorry," gone to my car and just left. But instead, I approached them and I said, "Hi, I'm from such and such church." I didn't even finish. He looked at me and said, "I don't care where you're from. Get off my property." And so, to some people, It's very important. So be wise where you walk. You also want to observe everything. As you approach the house, you're looking around, but you want to observe everything that's going on. Take in the details. Are there children's shoes next to the porch? Is there a swing set in the backyard? Is there a basketball goal? Are there bicycles? What size are they? All these things can tell you about the people there. Are there beer cans? Does this person smoke on their front porch? All sorts of indicators about what it's like, what goes on in their lives, the ages of the people that might live there if you don't already know. Are there packages or mail on the front porch? Could they be out of town? Are there several days of newspaper? There's lots of things that you can take in that will tell you about the situation. You also want to be very careful concerning warnings that they put up. So, for example, they may have up a sticker that says no solicitors. Now, there's a debate that goes on. Are we soliciting? Soliciting technically means you're selling something. Are you soliciting? Most people who put up no solicit signs would say, yes, you're soliciting because you're trying to get me to do something. And so you have to make a judgment call. If it says no soliciting, should I knock on the door or not? And at this point, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will say, listen to your heart, listen to your gut, and more than anything else, listen to the Lord. Also, are there decorations around? Do they have a favorite team? A college banner flying out front, a sign in the front that says that Johnny, number 55, plays football for the high school team. What do you see? It helps you to be prepared for the kind of conversations that you might have. Then, besides observing the house, be aware of your surroundings. Not just the house and the property, but even beyond that. Be aware of any distractions that might be there, anything that might pose a danger. Is there a dog nearby? Are there children playing out front? Are there people walking nearby? Are there, things that could distract nearby? Is there enough room on the porch for everybody in your team? Once I was visiting a house that had a very small porch, and I'd stepped all the way to the back edge, and yes, learned from my mistake, I lost my balance. And as the person opened the door to the house, they opened really just in time to see me falling into the bushes right in front of their porch. And it's not exactly the best way to make a visit, as you fall into the bushes, to say, hey, I'm so sorry, I just crushed your flowers. So be aware of your surroundings. Then be aware of another sign, and it's the beware of dog sign. Now, we talked about the no soliciting sign, and some people are very kind. You can go to their door, knock on it, and even though it says no soliciting, you can go ahead and they'll talk to you. In fact, let me just share this with you. Sometimes I'll simply write a letter that will simply say something like this. Dear friend, you don't know me, but I came by your house the other day. My name is such and such, and I'm from such and such church. When I noticed your no soliciting sign, I wanted to make sure that I respected your privacy. And yet, I didn't want to pass by without telling you that Jesus loves you. He changed my life, and I'm enclosing some information that tells you about how you can know him too. If you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call. And then just slip a gospel tract in, maybe a business card in with that letter, and simply put it up on their front porch. Now, you can't put it in their mailbox. There are laws. You can't put something in someone's mailbox. Some mailboxes have a clothespin. You can clothespin it. You can put it inside the door. You can do that very easily. But that is a very easy, nice approach to respect somebody, but also accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. Now, with the beware of dog sign, I made a mistake, again, long ago, and I did not respect beware of dog sign. I was at a house. It had a fenced-in front porch. I looked around. I didn't see a dog. Lesson number 1, just because you can't see a dog doesn't mean that the dog is not there. I thought it was just a way that they were trying to keep people out. In other words, no soliciting. Instead of saying, don't come up here, I'm just going to put a sign that says, beware of dog. Smart people will stay away. Well, I entered, and of course I was cautious, and I walked up to the porch, looked around, no dog, so I stepped up on the porch, and then I had an encounter that to this day, that I believe took several years off both my life and the life of the dog involved. Because as I knocked on the door, or I made some noise, rang the doorbell, A dog jumped out from under the porch. He had dug a hole, and he was down there having a nice little afternoon nap. And when I made noise, he jumped out. He saw me. He literally backpedaled about 8 feet backwards, stumbling over himself, tail tucked between his legs, scared to death. Of course, I did the exact same thing, backpedaled quickly, stumbling over myself, tail tucked between my legs. We went opposite directions, and then we both regathered our mentality enough for him to growl and charge and bark and try to bite, and me to run and scream and flee and yell like a 6th grade girl. And so, not exactly what you want happening when somebody opens the door. Now, fortunately, nobody was home, but I'm telling you, it's not an experience that you want to have. I was also once, unfortunately, chased by 2 Doberman Pinscher dogs. Again, not the experience that you want to have. Me and my partner, we ignored a beware of dog sign. We got out of the pickup. We're parked in front of the house. We had shut the gate behind us. He was walking up. I was walking behind, about 5 feet behind. He turned about, ran me over, yelling, "Get to the truck, get to the truck." And he ran me over, about knocked me down. I think actually his idea was, if I knock you down, they will eat you and they won't catch me. But I made it to the pickup, got in, shut the door. At that point, I had no idea what was happening. I jumped in the car. I'm thinking, man, with a shotgun, I have no idea what's going on. Jumped in the car, shut the door, and boom, at the door, there's this big face of a Doberman Pinscher. And let me tell you, that dog was not happy that we were on their property. And so all that to say, when you see signs like that, there are nice, respectful ways that you can still accomplish your same purpose without risking life and limb to do it. So be wise. You can leave a note like what we did with the soliciting, like what we suggested there. You can send them a letter. You can leave something. A lot of times there's a gate there because the owners have to come and go through there as well, where you can leave something as well. And so just some ideas. The last thing I want to throw in before we move on to a new section that'll actually get us onto the porch. Aren't you excited? Can't wait to get on the porch. That you want to keep an open eye and you want to keep an attitude of prayer. As you're visiting, realize there's a bigger picture that might be going on here, where the house you're visiting is not the person that God wants you to talk to. I've been in situations where I walk up to a house and we came to visit the people at this house, but we end up leading a person to the Lord who was the neighbor who just happened to be sitting on their front porch drinking sweet tea. You see, there's a bigger picture. God sent us there for a reason, but it really wasn't for the house that we were walking up to. It was for the people next door, or for the guy mowing his lawn over there, and you're knocking, and then suddenly he takes a break, and he's standing in the front yard looking at his lawn, and as you're walking away, you just walk over, introduce yourself, and start having a conversation. These are great opportunities. So keep an open eye. What else is around me? Not just on this property. What's around me? And then keep an attitude of prayer. God, what do you want to do? Where can I create an open door? And where's there already an open door just sitting wide, just waiting for me? Now, so far we've talked about kinds of visits. We have talked about basically preparing for a home visit, how to dress, who to visit, where to visit, what to take with you. We talked about praying before you go, eating a mint. Yes, that is important. We've talked about who's going to do the talking, choosing the talker, learning the information. We've talked about arriving at the house, where to park, how to approach it, observing it, being aware of your surroundings. We've talked about the no soliciting sign, the beware of dog sign. We've also talked about keeping an open eye and an attitude of prayer. Now, there's one more thing I want to add before we finish here. In the middle of all this, you can be the best person at making visits possible. But it's kind of like what 1 Corinthians 13 says about love, that it's just clanging noise if you don't have love. So if you're on that porch and you're there to do a job or to tack up another tally mark or to have another visit that you can turn in, I made that visit, or if it's there so that you look good, or maybe it's there because you're required to do it, you need to take a look, because what should be motivating you more than anything else is love. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of noise, a bunch of clanging cymbals out there, because love is what drives you. Love these people. Here's a person, I wonder if they know Jesus. I wonder if they're going to go to heaven. I wonder if they're saved. I wonder what they're going through, what they're struggling with. I wonder how I can help them, how I can pray for them. So in the middle of your visit, before we even get to the porch, I just want you to take a little reality check and just check your heart. Is love your main motivator? What's your goal? All right, we're going to move to part 2 now in the next segment.